September 3, 1943. Southern Italy. Before dawn, the sea is calm, the air heavy with tension. Allied landing craft slice silently through the dark toward the beaches of Salerno. Thousands of soldiers grip their rifles, staring into blackness, knowing that in minutes, hell will break loose. Somewhere offshore, aboard his command ship, General George S. Patton stands alone on deck, eyes locked on the coastline. He isn't assigned to this landing. He isn't supposed to be here. Yet he insisted. He wanted to feel the moment, to sense the opening of another campaign, to measure the enemy before the first shot. For Patton, war wasn't just strategy. It was instinct. And instinct told him Europe was about to become a battlefield where speed would decide everything. Patton had already built a reputation that made both friends and enemies uneasy. He spoke like a man who had lived a dozen lives before this one. He moved like time itself was chasing him. Where other generals planned, Patton hunted. Where others calculated, he gambled. His belief was simple. In war, hesitation killed more soldiers than bullets. If you struck first, harder and faster than the enemy expected, you didn't just win, you shattered their ability to resist. This philosophy would soon rewrite how modern armies fought. In North Africa, months earlier, Patton had inherited chaos. American forces were demoralized after brutal defeats at Kasserine Pass. German tanks had sliced through inexperienced U.S. units like knives through paper. Morale collapsed. Officers doubted their men. Soldiers doubted their leaders. When Patton arrived, he didn't give speeches about courage. He changed everything. Uniforms became spotless. Boots shined daily. Helmets worn at all times. Discipline tightened overnight. Not because Patton loved rules, but because discipline created pride, and pride created confidence. Within weeks, the same men who had retreated in panic stood firm against seasoned German veterans. When American forces finally counterattacked, they didn't inch forward. They surged. The Germans were stunned. Something had changed. And that something had a name. By the time Sicily began, German intelligence already regarded Patton as a problem. Their reports described him as reckless, aggressive, dangerously unpredictable. High Command debated whether he was brilliant or simply insane. What they didn't realize was that Patton wasn't improvising, he was accelerating. Every move he made was designed to outrun the enemy's ability to think. He didn't aim to defeat German strategy. He aimed to outrun it. During Sicily, his army moved so fast that supply officers were forced to invent new logistics on the fly. Trucks stole fuel from other Allied units. Infantry rode on tank decks. Engineers built bridges under fire while columns rolled across before the concrete dried. Entire battles were decided before German commanders even knew Patton was there. In one instance, German defensive lines were bypassed so rapidly that soldiers woke to find the enemy already behind them. Prisoners later described confusion, fear, and disbelief. They hadn't been beaten. They'd been overtaken. Patton's real power wasn't tanks or artillery. It was tempo. He changed the rhythm of war. Instead of a slow drumbeat, he turned battle into a sprint. His enemies were constantly reacting, never acting. And when armies react, they lose. That lesson exploded across France in the summer of 1944. After D-Day, the Allied armies became bogged down in Normandy's hedgerows. Progress slowed to yards per day. German machine guns and artillery turned every field into a killing zone. Frustration grew. Casualties mounted. Then the American line broke through. And Patton was unleashed. What followed wasn't a campaign. It was a collapse. Within days, Third Army poured through the breach like water through shattered glass. Columns stretched for miles, racing along roads, cutting through villages, bypassing strongholds, never stopping. German defenses dissolved. Headquarters fell before officers finished packing. Fuel dumps were captured intact. Bridges seized before demolition charges could be wired. Entire enemy units surrendered simply because they were cut off and confused. Patton's advance reached speeds unseen in modern warfare. Some armored spearheads traveled over 60 miles in a single day. His tanks ran so far ahead that fuel shortages became constant. But instead of slowing down, Patton accelerated. When gasoline ran out, he seized German fuel. When ammunition thinned, he captured enemy stockpiles. When bridges were destroyed, engineers built replacements overnight. German commanders struggled to respond. Their defensive plans assumed steady, predictable Allied movement. Patton shattered those assumptions. His attacks came from unexpected directions, at unexpected times, with overwhelming speed. One German general later wrote that fighting Patton felt like trying to stop a storm by building fences. By late August, Patton's army had liberated more territory than any Allied force in Europe. His name appeared in German intelligence summaries almost daily. Not as a general, as a phenomenon. Then winter came. In December 1944, Hitler launched his final gamble, a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes. American lines collapsed. Entire divisions were surrounded. Bastogne was cut off. Panic spread through Allied headquarters. Commanders debated retreat. Some feared a total breakdown. Patton had anticipated this. Weeks earlier, he had ordered his staff to prepare contingency plans for turning his army north, just in case. No one else believed the Germans could launch a major offensive. Patton did. When the attack came, his plans were already written. At Eisenhower's emergency conference, while generals argued and calculated, Patton simply announced his timeline. 3 days. That's all he needed. Silence followed. Turning an entire army through frozen mountains normally took weeks. But Patton had no intention of waiting for perfect conditions. He believed momentum created its own solutions. Orders flew out that same night. Columns reversed direction. Tanks spun around on icy roads. Convoys rerouted. Engineers worked non-stop. Infantry marched through snowstorms. Confusion reigned, but movement never stopped. 72 hours later, Patton attacked. His divisions smashed into the German southern flank, shattering their momentum. The siege of Bastogne was broken. Hitler's last offensive collapsed. German commanders were stunned. They had calculated Allied reaction time at 2 weeks minimum. Patton had done it in 3 days. After the war, German staff officers studied the maneuver in disbelief. Some concluded Patton understood operational mobility better than any commander on either side. Others believed he simply ignored limits others accepted. Either way, the result was the same. He changed what armies believed was possible. By 1945, Germany was collapsing. Allied forces pressed toward the Rhine, the final natural barrier protecting the German heartland. Most commanders planned massive set-piece crossings with overwhelming firepower. Patton chose speed instead. One night, under cover of darkness, his infantry slipped across in assault boats. No bombardment. No massive build-up. No announcement. By morning, his bridgehead was secure. German defenders had barely fired a shot. When the world learned Patton had crossed first, shock rippled through Allied command. His crossing wasn't just tactically brilliant. It was psychological warfare. It told both friend and enemy that Patton could strike anywhere, any time, without warning. German resistance afterward crumbled. Their final defensive lines were pierced before they solidified. Cities surrendered without prolonged fighting. Entire units laid down arms simply to avoid facing Third Army head-on. As the war ended, Allied soldiers reflected on what it had been like to serve under him. They spoke of exhaustion, fear, relentless pressure, but also of confidence. Under Patton, they believed they would win, because losing simply wasn't part of his vocabulary. Patton himself would not live to see the long peace he had helped create. But his methods reshaped modern warfare. Speed, aggression, shock, momentum. Principles now taught in military academies around the world were forged in the chaos he commanded. He wasn't flawless. He was impulsive, arrogant, often controversial. But when history demanded someone who could do what no one else dared, his name rose to the top again and again. Because Patton didn't fight battles. He overwhelmed them. And in doing so, he carved his name permanently into the story of human conflict.